pointed down, so not the boy. Okay, plantar flexion, dorsiflexion. Neutral would be anatomical position. You pull the toes upwards, then you're going dorsally for a baby's orientation, and then plantar going towards the plantar surface of the ankle. Opposition is the thumb and the baby finger. Only the thumb and the baby finger, your fifth finger, have opponent muscles. So truly they're the only ones that have the ability to oppose each other. You can flex the others and bring your thumb to the others, but they're not coming across to the thumb. They're flexing and then the thumb is coming to the first, middle, and ring finger. So only the thumb and the baby finger, they are the only ones that have muscles that can do this opposition. Retraction, elevation, depression of the jaw is there because of the weird shape of your temporomandibular joint. It has two bones, a fossa in your temporal bone, and then that condylar process of your mandible. But there's an intra-articular disc there, and that gives you more movement for that joint. So you can really drop the jaw down, and you can also stick your chin out and pull your chin back. You can also, while your jaw is open, really wide, you can make circles with the jaw. So essentially what you're doing is dislocating that temporomandibular joint and then allowing the mandibular process to move within the joint. Don't recommend you doing that because it puts a lot of stress on the intra-articular cartilage. And people who do that while they're asleep, they end up with temporomandibular joint disease, so generation of that. Lateral flexion is going within anatomical plane, bringing your ear towards your shoulder and then up. So it's always lateral, so lateral to the right, and then usually instead of extension, you just say reduction of the flexion. That's how Dr. Jen taught me, Dr. Prince taught me that. So I'm sure he'd probably still agree with that. So lateral flexion, and then you reduce the flexion back to anatomical position. So summary of planes of movement. If you have a hinge joint, it only can do one thing, flex and extend. So ankles can only flex and extend at the subtalar joint. At the tibial-talar joint. When you get other bones involved, then you can get other movement. But anything that has a trochlea, that is a joint that has a trochlea, it's a hinge joint. It is monoaxial. So all hinge joints are monoaxial. Anything that can flex, extend, and adduct has two planes of movement are called biaxial joints. So they can do this next type of activity when you connect flexion with abduction, with hyperextension, and then back to anatomical position, you get circumduction going on. But really you only, for example, in your wrist, you can flex and extend, you can radially and ulnar deviate, and then you can circumduct your wrist. But you can't do rotation of your wrist. Your wrists don't spin around like your shoulders do. So these are biaxial joints. They have three movements they can do, but really only two planes of motion that they're moving through. And those are flexion and extension, which is one plane, and abduction and adduction, which is the second plane. If you have a triaxial joint, you can call it a multi-axial joint. Then you have three movements. Those joints can flex, extend, abduct, and adduct, and they can rotate. That's your third plane of motion. So a triaxial joint can flex, can extend, abduct, adduct, circumduct, and then also rotate internally and externally. So pivot joints, those are joints that only pivot. So triaxial can pivot, also flex, extend, abduct, and adduct. But a pivot joint is something like your radius on your humerus. All it does is pivot. And distally, all it does is pivot on the ulna. So here's that weird temporomandibular joint. It has an intra-articular disc of fibrocartilage. It actually has two joint spaces. It has a joint capsule that spans both sides of the intra-articular disc, and then synovial fluid on both sides of that intra-articular disc. Because there's more space there, you can get the joint to come apart and do that excursion of the jaw around in a circle. But again, I don't recommend you do that at all. It's stabilized by various ligaments. So there's the articular capsule, but then there's a lateral ligament. If there's a lateral, there's going to be a medial ligament. It also is stabilized by ligaments that come from the styloid process to the angle of the jaw, so stylomandibular ligament. Inside is your sphenomandibular ligament. So part of the reason that you can do that type of motion and side-to-side motion with your jaw is due to those pterygopalatine muscles that are attached to your pterygoid plates of your sphenoid bone. So medial and lateral pterygoid muscles, and then these ligaments coming from those same pterygoid processes. Okay, take a break.